Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for the notifications, hit the thumbs up, do all the things. Let's wrap it up. The last division, Sam. We're 7 out of 8 divisions done. Let's wrap it up with the AFC South. How hard could it be? Houston Texans are up first. A little turnover on the offensive coaching staff. Nick Caley's coming in to call the plays. Our friend Bobby Slowick is out. But it was a rough year up front for the Houston Texans. Offensive line, I think performance, preparation. They weren't handling stunts, twists. They weren't blocking anybody. It just wasn't good. And that feels like the number one priority this offseason, reshaping that offensive line and or just making sure that schematically they are sound and ready to go to maximize CJ Stroud's ability, the pass catcher's ability. And, they've got some pretty good talent on that side of the ball overall.
Yeah, whatever the reason for the offensive line's performance last season, they need to get it fixed this offseason. And there are people out there that blame Bobby Slowick for that. There are people out there that blame the personnel for that. Whatever it is, that's the thing that needs to be fixed. Now, if it was the coaching, they've already gone some way to fixing that by making the change at offensive coordinator. If you think it's personnel, we've still got work to do because a lot of that personnel looks the same right now. So I agree. I think the offensive line was by far the biggest problem on this team last year, and definitely should be priority one this offseason to get turned around.
My stuff's failing me. My technology's failing me, so I can't see everything here. So, yeah, I think...
hate to see it.
I know. You do hate to see it. Let me find get my iPad here going here. Where else you want to start with Houston? By the way, like the Stefan Diggs thing, I don't want to say I've like completely written him off, but, he did some pretty good things in Houston before the injury. I don't know if he was going to be a massive difference maker, but would you try to bring Diggs back, especially coming off the injury? Maybe try to get him cheap? Because I love the move at the time. If you're Houston, you had Nico Collins, who started looking like a star, Tank Dell, and Stefan Diggs. I love that trio. Good luck. Try to cover it. Dalton Schultz. Good luck. Just never played out like that. But would you try to run it back with a cheap 1-year deal for Diggs?
So this is the thing, right? It's if you could get him on a 1-year deal, maybe. But remember, they specifically reworked his contract to ensure that they could have had him for next year without touching his contract. If they just kept the deal that they traded for him on, he would still be on the team next year. But instead, they specifically reworked it to ensure that he would hit free agency this offseason because of the baggage that he was kind of bringing with him. So if you could convince him to come back on a 1-year deal and then hit free agency again, or just basically no more security than that, cool. But if he's going to want like a 2 or 3 year deal from somebody, I think you've already indicated you don't want any part of that.
I would take a look at it for the 1 year. Beyond that, I mean, they've tried to address some of the offensive line. They had to reshuffle. They brought in Jarrett Patterson, Juice Scruggs over the last couple of years to play center, play guard, move those guys around. Blake Fisher was a second-round tackle last year. He kind of struggled when he had to get in there as a rookie. Like I don't think they're done trying to sort out that offensive line just from a personnel standpoint, even though theoretically they have 5+ starters back, or at least 6 or 7 guys with starting experience.
Well, that's the thing, right? So part of the problem last year is that the line was reshuffled like every couple of weeks. Like they never locked in, this is the 5 we want, and they're going to be there every single week. Injuries were forcing constant reshuffles, which I'm sure didn't help the whole situation. So that's part of the problem. And then, you have the kind of evaluation part, which is they brought in a lot of, like, Laramie Tunsil is great at left tackle. Shaq Mason at one point has been a top tier right guard. He didn't play that way. You former first round picks, like Kenyon Green, hasn't played at that level at all. He's played his way to the bench. Then you've got that duo of effectively centers that have been swapping over and playing guard and stuff, Juice Scruggs and Jarrett Patterson. Like, how good are each one of those guys? Are they 2 starters? Are they 1 starter? And then Blake Fisher, the second-round pick from a year ago. These are 4 or 5 young players that I don't know if any of those guys are actually going to end up being high level or even above average starters for you going forward. At the very minimum, 2 of the starting spots resting in the hands of those guys are kind of question marks until you figure out how good they're going to be. And that's part of the issue. So you've got a right guard who you thought was really good and now might not be. A left guard situation, which is just up in the air. Maybe that's Titus Howard, who was a former right tackle, moved into left guard to try and fix it. It's just the whole thing is still very up in the air. Like it's very nothing is locked down other than your left tackle, who's great.
And Fisher at right tackle, Blake Fisher, he could be good as he was developmental second round type. So I think they got to go back to that well and throw more bodies at it because again, it's another one of those rosters where I don't think there's a ton of glaring short-term needs, immediate needs across the roster. There's a lot of players with starting experience coming back. You still want to upgrade spots. You want to add depth. They're one of the few teams. Yeah, do you want to add depth on the defensive line like everyone else does? But they're in really good shape there with their 1-2 punch at the on the edge in particular with Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. I think it's offensive line, and in the late first round, that could be a spot where the Texans, potentially grab a starting guard. I don't know if you want to use another first round pick on a guard like you did with Kenyon Green a couple of years ago. So I think it's a tricky spot other than throw some bodies at that on the offensive line, throw some bodies at it. The other thing you can do is go to free agency and pay for some more known commodities. So you're not just hoping for the development like they have with so many players.
Yeah, and I think because because there's so many young bodies that haven't necessarily proved anything, I think they want some certainty and some assurance of veterans. You can definitely do free agency. The problem is, again, I think the best spot for free agency is actually left tackle, but that's the one spot they're great at, right? The other element is potential cut candidates, right? A guy like Jack Conklin from Cleveland might end up getting released. If you could pounce on a Jack Conklin, who's definitely not, he's not what he used to be, which is one of the better right tackles in the NFL. But even now, if you can keep him healthy, like Jack Conklin's definitely a solid starting right tackle for you. So if you could get a Jack Conklin on the cheap after he gets released, if that happens, that's a great move.
I like that. To Jack Conklin, push Blake Fisher back to the backup spot. Also haven't mentioned him in a while, so we got to bring him back up. If you need a starting right tackle, Sam, there is always
Ding.
The great Morgan Moses. We could always bring him in at right tackle or the cut candidate, Jack Conklin. I do like that as well. Bump Fisher back to the developmental role and swing tackle. I think that's a good option there. I don't think they're going to – they get the two options at center. I don't think they change much there. And then it's right guard. Maybe it's a Tyler Booker in the first round if he's available at 25, and then the right tackle situation that we just mentioned, and this thing looks a lot better already. And all the while, they still have all these young guys kind of bumped back into backup roles, and they could still develop and become longer-term options.
And I do wonder, I mean, Mekhi Becton was a guy who had struggled at tackle, had a great season for the Eagles at guard. Part of that was just staying healthy. But, like, are there teams out there that still view him as a tackle? Like, would Mekhi Becton be an option for somebody at right tackle as opposed to just a guard now that he's had his good season at guard? Also a guard. Like, Mekhi Becton is theoretically an option for multiple spots along this offensive line.
Where else are you looking here if you're the Texans? Because again, like when you just look at the depth chart, it's like, hey, a lot of starters coming back. I think they're strong in a lot of the right places. They have two good starting corners, really three good starters in the secondary, including Jalen Petrie. They've got their two starting safeties. They're pretty good on the defensive line. They could stand to use one of those big bodied run stoppers, I would say, at defensive tackle. But there's not a lot of acute needs here. And man, it's a great job by Nick Caserio to get to this point as general manager, where years ago we were criticizing him 3-4 years ago for not adding any impact players, and 3-4 years later you're looking at this team that outside of the offensive line, you're feeling pretty good about the depth here.
Yeah, I mean, I do think you want to add receiver help. Nico Collins is phenomenal as a number one. Tank Dell looks really good, but is now coming off like back-to-back significant injuries. That one in particular this time looked pretty horrific. So at this point, we don't know what he's going to be coming back off that. So I think you definitely want some depth at receiver. John Mechie, Robert Woods, these are guys that are not at the level you need them to be if you need to rely on them as your number 2, number 3 receivers, like Robert Woods anymore, and Mechie maybe never. I think you definitely want to be diving into the free agent group, whether it's free agent or diving into the wide receiver group, whether it's free agency or the draft as well.
Technically don't have a ton of cap space, but you're still living in this rookie contract window with CJ Stroud. So I think there's some flexibility here with Houston. They took advantage of that last year with the Danielle Hunter move, bringing him in, and Stefan Diggs. They started to take advantage of those opportunities, having the first contract for CJ Stroud. So I think they have the ability to be aggressive where needed, as far as free agency goes. What about I would love to see another good route runner at receiver. Your guy Jalen Royals from Utah State, maybe as a second, third round selection, depending on where he's available, to complement Tank Dell and Nico Collins. And then with Tank Dell, I don't know, injured 2 straight years, are we worried about his durability? Maybe is receiver a bigger need than we really considered?
I mean, I'm less worried about his durability and more worried about that specific injury that he had this year. Like, that's the kind of injury I think that can change the career, like can change the trajectory of a player. Now, hopefully it doesn't. I mean, I love Tank Dell. I think he looks like a fantastic player. But if you're the Texans looking at that, you're like, we can't guarantee that this guy's going to be the same coming back off that injury. So at the very minimum, we need to try and upgrade wide receiver 2 so that if he isn't the same, it's less of a problem.
And then I mentioned the need maybe for the big body defensive tackle. This could be the Deion Walker type of play here. Deion Walker, I don't love him for everyone. The Kentucky 360-pounder. We'll see what he weighs in here today, or what his actual weight and movement skills look like. He's a developmental player for me because there's great reps and there's bad reps. I might be able to live with that on a deep defensive line like this, where maybe he doesn't have to be dependent upon right away. So I kind of like that maybe for Houston versus some other teams, the Deion Walker, second, third round type of developmental play.
I don't even know if you need necessarily a big body defensive tackle, but I think you definitely want something on the inside that can push the pocket, because at the moment you've got those 2 edge rushers that are amazing as a duo. Will Anderson on one side, Danielle Hunter on the other side. You've got some depth there as well, but you don't really have a threat that's pushing the pocket in the middle. And if you had that as well, all of a sudden you've got like nowhere to go for a quarterback, right? You've got threats coming off either edge and you've got a pocket collapsing up the middle. Now you're just in trouble. If the pocket's not collapsing up the middle, you've at least got somewhere to step into. You can try and maintain the semblance of a pocket, and you can get rid of the football before the edge rushers can get home. I think this Texans defensive front would go from really good to like utterly destructive if they were able to find some kind of interior force that could move the needle as well.
How about Jaron Reed in free agency? Been a pretty dependable interior pass rusher. Had a nice season last year for Seattle, rushing the quarterback. He's a potential option to add to the mix. So let's do that. Plus, they fired Bobby, so it's all going to be good in Houston. It's all solved and fixed.
Wow.
That's what the people say. I love Bobby. He's still fine. He's still good. He's going to help Miami. Pass game coordinator. Is that it on the Texans? Did we solve them? Did we fix them? I mean,
I think
the bottom line, by the way, the bottom line fixing them is Nick Caley coming in and fixing CJ Stroud. I think whether it was Bobby or the reported rift between Bobby and Stroud, whatever it was. I mean, Stroud regressed last year. His production regressed. The offense regressed. Everything got worse last year. But after year 1, Stroud had one of the better rookie years of the last 15 seasons, right? As far as his ability to make plays in the pocket, then start making plays outside of structure. He looked great. It looked like a future star as a rookie. If Caley can get him back to what he just did as a rookie in 2023, a lot of this, they're in good position, right? The Texans, they've been a Final Four team in the AFC over the last 2 years, right? They could easily be back there and then competing for AFC championships if they get Stroud back on track.
Yeah, and where they're picking in the draft, is it 25? Like, that's in the range of a lot of offensive line help as well. We've been focusing on free agency, but like that's in the Gray Zabel world, the Tyler Booker world, maybe Josh Simmons, maybe Josh Connolly, the Oregon offensive tackle. Like, that's in that kind of ballpark for all of those guys. So I think you can definitely add a starting offensive lineman with that first-round draft pick.
Texans, fixed, solved, we got it.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.